Hey everyone, welcome to Transformational Tuesdays with Tasha. I am your host, Tasha M. Scott, the owner of Maximize Growth LLC and the founder of the movement Connected Women Win. I come on here every Tuesday and we have discussions around a book called Atomic Habits. But for the first part of this, I wanted to kind of take a step back and do a quick review, but also tell you why am I doing this? For myself, I've been on a transformational journey that started probably during COVID or before. And one of the things that when my own transformation started, as an entrepreneur, I found myself in a stuck place. I found myself in a place where even while I was doing business, I didn't know who I needed to be when I showed up. So even though business was still going on for me, I didn't show up here in this space. I didn't show up doing videos, and I was doing videos several times a week. But I didn't show up here in this space because I didn't feel me. I didn't know who I was in the transformation. So I put it off. I procrastinated. And even with my team, we would make plans and I would always put it off. But then one day I told my team, I said, you know what? I just need a space where I can just show up and be just me, just Tasha. So I created this Instagram channel. And again, this is in my transformational journey. I created this Instagram page and I called it just_Tasha 2.0. And what I've been doing on this page is I've been sharing my personal journey of transformation. I have been working out with a trainer, getting ready for a fitness competition, overcoming my own personal fears, you name it. But it was all the things that was basically me showing up as me. Didn't have anything to do with business, but I found something out while I was doing this. I found out that my clients in business were watching this. I had people when I would go out say, "You're inspiring me, Tasha. Thank you for showing us your transformation. Thank you for showing us your journey." And I'll be honest, y'all, I thought when I first did it, is anybody even going to care? I really wasn't doing it for that, but I really was just being my authentic self. And so when I started noticing again the influence, I said, you know what? Coming into this year, I said, I want to do something on purpose. Not to say that wasn't on purpose, but I said, I want to tie this into the business and do it on purpose. And again, on my own transformational journey, really reconnect my business, reconnect my purpose, all of those things. And so as I was contemplating how was I going to show up in the space, I looked around my environment, and one of the things that was so obvious to me was my love for books. As you can see back here on my shelf, this is not even a fraction, y'all, but I decided I wanted to show up using books. And so that's when I came up with the book that we were going to go over for this first part, and that's Atomic Habits, because that book literally speaks to how to literally not just create good habits, how to break bad habits. And we're going to talk about all of that, but it really speaks to who do I want to become in the process of transformation. And so tonight is episode 7 that we have started since starting this in February. But before we dig really deep into each of them, again, I love interacting with people. So thank y'all for tuning in. Sandra, you are always one of the first people on here. Thank you for tuning in every week, and thank you for your engagement. Miss Judy, so good to see you on here tonight. Thank you. Well, I want to kind of take us another step back and just do some reviews before we talk about our main topic tonight, and that is how to break bad habits. I want to do a review for our previous ones, just in case there's someone on here who maybe you are just coming in for the first time with us, or maybe you've missed some episodes. So when we first started this book, the first chapter we talked about was the surprising power of atomic habits. We should aim for tiny changes 1% improvement to build better habits. That was our focus of that, to say it doesn't have to be this big production. It's about just doing one thing, taking one step, one day at a time, and improving in 1%. And we talked about how powerful tiny changes really are to get on the path to becoming successful with our habits. The second chapter, we talked about how your habits shape your identity, or vice versa. And we really uncovered that true behavior change is identity change. And I loved when Mr. Clear, the author of this book, James Clear, he challenged us and he said, we have to decide on the person that we want to be. It's not just enough to create a goal or just to say, I want to start a new habit. He said, you have to decide the person that you want to be, because at the end of the day, your identity is the thing that's going to fuel whether you're going to stay consistent with those habits. And he said, once you decide the person that you want to be, whether he gave some examples, let's say you you want to create a good habit of working out. He said maybe the person you want to be is an athlete. So what does an athlete do to maintain healthy habits? That's just one example. He said, once you decide who you want to be, then you have to prove it to yourself with small wins. And that goes back to the 1% improvement. He talked about this guy in this chapter who was biting his nails. And he said he had a really bad nail biting habit. And so one of the things that he did is he asked his wife to book an appointment so he could get a manicure. So he went and started getting his nails done. And once he started getting his nails done, he started noticing how his hands started improving. They looked better. And he started taking pride in how good his hands were looking. So he stopped the nail biting habit because now he took pride in how well they look. And this is one of the things that Mr. Clear says. He says, when your pride is involved, you will fight tooth and nail to maintain healthy habits. That was pretty powerful. The third chapter he talked about was how to build better habits in 4 simple steps. And he talked about 4 things. He said there was cue. And he said cues trigger the brain to initiate a behavior. He said then there's craving. Craving is the motivational force behind every behavior. Then he says from there is the response. That's the actual habit that you perform. And then reward, that's the end goal of every habit. So he said the 4-step process of building better habits was cue, craving, response, and reward. And when it comes to the reward, the end goal, he says the first purpose of the reward is to satisfy the craving. Then he says the second purpose is to teach us which actions are worth remembering in the future. Because once our brain basically has a habit ingrained in our brain, it becomes automatic. And so just to recap this 4-step process, he says the cue actually triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving and ultimately becomes associated with the cue. I'm going to repeat those 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. And he used these 4 simple steps throughout the rest of the book. And we're going to uncover these on how to build better habits and how to break unhealthy habits. Then chapters 4 through 7, in what he did was he took these cues and now he started talking about the laws of behavior change. And chapters 4 through 7, he went through the first law of behavior change, and that is make it obvious. Chapter 4, as he introduced us to this law of make it obvious, this was related to cue. And he said, we have to make our old habits obvious so that we can change them. We can't afford to go into avoidance mode if we're going to have atomic habits. And number 5, chapter 5, he said the best way to start a new habit is we have to be specific with our intentions. And one way that we can be specific, he used an example. It's called a simple strategy statement. And I'll give you the formula, and then I'll give you my personal simple strategy statement. So the formula, he says, is I will blank. And in this first blank, you insert the behavior. At blank, you insert time. In blank, insert location. So let me share mine with you. My simple strategy statement is I will work out at 9 o'clock a.m. in the morning at 2A Fitness. So this was my simple strategy statement so that I could start building a better habit or fuel my habit of working out. It wasn't just enough to say, I want to be fit. I want to do this. I want to do that. I had to have a plan in place, right? And so, number 6, he talked about motivation is overrated. And this is all about making it obvious still. He said, motivation is overrated. Environment often matters most. And this is what we talked about last week. He used the example of the hospital cafeteria. And he said that they decided in the hospital cafeteria to place water in strategic locations by the register, in obvious places, as well as healthy food. And in the book, he said that the sales of water went up. The junk food sales decreased. The soda sales decreased. And all they did was change the environments and place things in obvious places, and nobody said a word to anybody. And he talked about how we could really benefit from changing our environments so that, give an example, somebody last week said, I need to go get rid of those cookies in my cabinet, right? So that I can get rid of those cookies and maybe place some healthy food so I can make it obvious. So that leads us to tonight. Tonight, we are focusing on, again, how to make it obvious. We're focusing on the secret to self-control, or how to break bad habits. And I just want to do a check-in just to make sure y'all are with me. If this is you, do you have a bad habit that you need to break? If you do, type yes in the comments. Type yes in the comments. You don't have to tell me what your habits are, because I'm not trying to expose anybody like that. But just type yes in the chat. And I'm going to say yes for me too. Thank you for your honesty. I see your yeses. Thank you. Thank you. And me too. So tonight we're going to talk about the secret to self-control and how to break these bad habits. He started off, I love how every chapter starts off with a story, y'all. So he talked about an addiction story where in 1971, it was Vietnam. It was the 16th year. There were 2 congressmen from Illinois who discovered that 15% of U.S. soldiers that were stationed there were heroin addicts. And they put activities in place, like they had the Special Action Office of Drug Prevention to promote prevention and rehabilitation. And they wanted to track these addicted service members when they returned home. And they found out that when the servicemen returned home, 5%, only 5% became re-addicted within a year, and just 12% relapsed within 3 years. And what they discovered was that the addictions could be dissolved if there was a radical change in the environment. But when they were in Vietnam, their cues were being triggered. They were being triggered by the fact that they had easy access to it. They were under constant stress from the war. They had friends who were heroin addicts. There were so many different cues that were triggering and supporting their addiction. But once they returned home back to the US, they didn't have the same cues that triggered them. They were removed from the environment, and that's why a large part of the addictions basically dissolved. That is a powerful point, but we could say, well, I don't have a drug habit. I don't have this habit. It's not that serious. But I love that y'all were so honest in here and said, yep, I do have a bad habit. Because what they did back then, when they did these studies on Vietnam, they ran them counter to cultural beliefs about bad habits. And you could actually insert any bad habit into the blank, and the principle would still be the same. And with our culture, we place a heavy emphasis on discipline. And sometimes we beat people up as a society because we say you're not disciplined enough. You need to have more discipline. And it's true. Scientists have proven that disciplined people, they they're better at structuring their lives because they don't have the cues that trigger them. The only difference between disciplined people and people that struggle, though, is really just how they manage their self-control. That's the difference. And they spend less time in tempting situations. That's the difference. And he said in the book, he said the people with the best self-control are the ones who need it the least. It's easier to practice self-restraints when you don't have to use it very often. So, yes, we need perseverance. Yes, we need grit. Yeah, we need willpower to be successful. But how many of y'all know that's not enough? He says that if we want to improve our qualities, create better habits, break old habits, he said it's not about wishing that we were more disciplined. He said it's about creating a disciplined environment. We're back there again. Did y'all catch this? It's not, I need to be more disciplined, because how many of us beat ourselves up because we're saying, I should be more disciplined. I should have more strength. I should have more willpower than this. I should be able to resist those cookies or whatever your thing is, right? But he says that at the end of the day, it's about creating a disciplined environment. And he said bad habits for all of us have a process of feeding on themselves. So does this sound familiar? You feel bad, so you eat junk food. You eat junk food because you feel bad. Or maybe you say your thing is, I watch way too much television because it makes me sluggish. And so you feel bad. But then what do? You watch more television. Or here's another example: we worry. Worrying has a way of making us feel anxious. And the more we worry, the more anxious we become. So what do? We worry more, right? That's an example of bad habits feeding on themselves. And a lot of times, just like those soldiers who were in Vietnam, who were in environments that induced the triggers, the cues induced it. A lot of times what happens is we are not, it's almost like it's on autopilot, that we're not even obvious. It's not obvious to us anymore. You know, it's on autopilot. And so we just do it because that's what we've always done. Right. And he says, then you're in this cycle, because once you do notice something, it's almost like you're trying to muster up the willpower and resist it, but it's right there in your environment. And so what do? You give in. I have right now a strict eating plan because of the workout regimen that I'm on. So right now I can't have junk food. I can't have it. Doesn't say I don't want it. But my daughter loves lemon Oreo cookies. And so what's in the pantry? Lemon Oreo cookies. And there have been times, don't tell my trainer this, okay? But there have been times where I literally will walk by the pantry and know that I don't need the cookies. I can't have the cookies. But because I have tried to muster up all this willpower and discipline, what do? I go eat a cookie. And really, it's because it's in my environment, right? And so, who was the person that said last week? I think it was Mila that said that. How'd that go for you, Mila? But what he's saying, y'all, is that we can break a habit, but we're not really likely to forget it, you know? And so what we have to do is stop thinking that we are strong like that, when really we've got to just change our environment. He said simply resisting temptation is not an effective strategy. Is there anybody here that you relate to what I just shared about the cookie story, or maybe you have something else? Simply resisting it is not going to work all the time. So you can't stick to positive habits in a negative, and negative, that's a perception, right? Negative can be anything where it's something where you say it's just not good for me. It may be good for other people, but it's not good for me in this moment. And see, he said a more reliable approach to cut bad habits, to really cut them, is cut them off at the source. We have to reduce our exposure to the cue. Okay, did y'all catch what I just said? He said if we're going to break bad habits, we have to cut it off at the source. And we have to stop beating ourselves up and saying, I'm just not disciplined enough. I'm just not strong enough. Cut it off. Here's some examples. He gave some examples, and I love that he doesn't just leave us hanging. He gave examples. He said, it could be an example of if you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you're continually feeling like you're not enough and you're scrolling on Facebook or social media and you're comparing yourself to other people, he said, stop following social media accounts that trigger the jealousy or the envy or the comparison. I've actually had to do this, y'all. I've had to unfollow, unsubscribe, block in some cases so that I could literally cut off at the source the negativity that is being fueled. He said, if you're wasting too much time watching television, maybe in your room, he said, move the TV out of the bedroom. If you're spending too much money on electronics or on something else, quit. He said, when it comes to electronics, quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. Basically, cut it off at the source. And this is where he talked about the inversion of the first law of behavior change. To make a habit healthy, he says you have to make it obvious. But to break a bad habit, you have to make it invisible. Remove a single cue, and the entire habit fades away. That's what happened with the soldiers in Vietnam. When they returned home, they weren't in the same environment anymore. Now, I know that's drastic. I know not everybody can, like, you may be on a job and you say, well, Tasha, I can't just up and quit my job or whatever that looks like. But here's one of the things that I have been studying myself. What's within my control? What's within your control? Because at the end of the day, sometimes the only reasons why we feel stuck is because we feel like we don't have options. But what is within our control? And so there might be some things that are within my control. And I guarantee you, if we looked hard enough and long enough, there's some things that I can do. So my daughter, she likes lemon Oreo cookies. So I can't deny her lemon Oreo cookies because I can't have them. So what's within my control is to make it more obvious the things that I can have, right? That's within my control. And so self-control, he says, is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it's unlikely you can muster up the willpower to override your desires every time. Remember, I said some of us are going to have struggles in certain areas. It may be okay for other people, but you know you. And so the secret to self-control, again, he said, make the cues of your good habit obvious and the cues of your bad habit invisible. Let me just kind of pause right here and just ask y'all, is this resonating with you? I love these comments that are coming in, but is this resonating with you? And he said, instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent in optimizing your environment. Now, I had to do a deep dive into environment because I know sometimes when we think environment, we think about a physical location, right? We think about home or work or whatever that looks like. But the Google definition for environment can be defined as a sum total of all the living and non-living elements and their effects that influence human life. So your environment may not always be a physical environment. it could be you subjecting yourself to whatever that looks like. Somebody want to give me an example in here, um, of what you would say a non-living element would be, but this is going to be perspective. This is going to be specific to you. One of the things, let me go here real quick. I love what Sandra's saying here. She said, my sad habit is going to mindless, distracting activities when I'm stressed instead of working through the discomfort. I'm aware of this habitual choice more and more lately. Now I see I can change my environment to support a healthier direction. Art allows me to express the emotion rather than shutting it off. I need to freshen up my art area and pull the table out so I'll see it sooner, and it will invite me to pick up a paintbrush. That will make it an easier choice to move in a healthier. I love that. I love that, Sandra. That's a great example right there. Because yeah, I know I say this all the time at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, we know ourselves. We know ourselves. We know what our triggers are. Nobody has to come and tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, you've got an issue with this. We know, don't we? We know. And so we have to do what's within our control. And again, not just rely on willpower and grit and perseverance, and not just beat ourselves up and say, I should be more disciplined. Sometimes we literally have to do some drastic changes, right? So I want to just kind of give y'all, I've shared some information with you. I want to just kind of give you some things to be thinking about. The first one is more of a reflection question. What will you change in your environment to better serve you? You don't have to answer this in the chat. If you're taking notes from what I'm talking about, write it in your journal. Write it somewhere where you can see this. Because again, if we're going to make it more obvious, our healthy habits, we've got to make our bad habits invisible. So here's the reflection question again. What will you change in your environment to better serve you? That's a point of reflection, because I don't want you to just come here to Transformational Tuesdays, hear this information, and don't go do anything with it. So as you're thinking about what needs to change in your environment to better serve you, I really want you to put some thought into this. And then I want you to move from reflection to declaration. Here's my declaration. I will redesign or restructure my environment to help me in my plan to get rid of my bad habits. I'm going to repeat it. I will redesign or restructure my environment to help me in my plan to get rid of my bad habits. That's a declaration. And so the first one was a reflection question. The second one was a declaration. Now a plan of action. How many of y'all like action steps? Okay. So here's two things. Plan of action. You're going to have to become more aware of your environment to see what cues you can actually eliminate that tend to feed your bad habit. This is where you're literally going to go on a fact-finding mission and literally inspect your life and become more aware of your environment and see what cues you can eliminate that tend to feed your bad habits. That's number one plan. Number two, do it. Remove the cues and reduce your exposure. So the first one is awareness. The second one is action. Just do it. My goal is to cut out junk food. So for me, yes, my daughter will have her food in the thing, but I have to on purpose. I literally went to the store today and I bought some apples. I've got apples sitting on my counter. I've got walnuts. I've got, everything for me that is obvious. So I don't have any excuse of why I can't grab something healthy. I've got my water. I told y'all I keep this with me. So become aware and do the work. And that's what I've been doing on my own transformational journey, y'all, is I've been becoming more self-aware and I've been taking more action. We're all works in progress. So this is not about perfection. This is about being on an adventure of your life and living the life that you know that you're called to live. So I hope this helped you. And next week, we're going to actually dig into the second law of behavior change, and that is make it attractive. So the first one, we've spent these last few weeks about make it obvious. Now we're going to talk about how do you make it attractive. And if this is helping you, please do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the channel platform that you're on, and share this with others. And if you're watching the replay, you can still engage in the comments. I love going back and seeing who watches after the fact. So when you watch replay, just put hashtag replay in there, and I'd love to continue engaging with you. And we're going to continue this journey on Transformational Tuesdays with Tasha using this book, Atomic Habits. And my challenge to you, y'all, is make your positive habits obvious and make your negative habits invisible. Let's create the adventure that is called our life so that we can be intentional about living on purpose. Thank y'all so much for being on this adventure, this journey with me. And I can't wait to go deeper with you. Y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you next week on Transformational Tuesdays with Tasha. Bye.